The radio transmission crackled through the static of the brewing snowstorm, distorted by distance and the violent staccato of machine gun fire. It was the sound of men who had accepted their death. Viper 21 to any station. Broken Arrow at grid 44 Charlie. I repeat, Broken Arrow. We are pinned. Casualties heavy. It's over. The voice belonged to a SEAL team leader, choking on dust and blood, screaming into a radio that might as well have been screaming into the void. Above him, the sky was empty. No helicopters, no salvation, just the gathering darkness of a storm that cared nothing for American lives bleeding into Afghan soil. Then a new voice cut through the frequency. It was calm, devoid of the panic consuming the valley below, yet colder than the wind howling over the peaks. Viper 21, this is Sierra 10. Hold your position. Who is this? The SEAL screamed back. The sky is empty. There's nobody out here.
I am here, the female voice replied, her breathing rhythmic, controlled, terrifyingly slow. Do not move. The first round is in the air. Time of flight, 6 seconds.
6 seconds from where? That's impossible. The impact arrived late, like a thunderclap following lightning, echoing off the canyon walls. Down in the valley, an enemy fighter's head misted into pink spray. The sound rolled across the rocks like the voice of God. One down. The woman on the mountain cycled the bolt of her rifle, the spent brass casing tumbling into the snow beside her. She exhaled slowly, watching her breath freeze instantly on the scope lens. 38 to go. 48 hours earlier. Forward Operating Base Keystone sat like a scar on the face of the Hindu Kush Mountains, a collection of mud-brown HESCO barriers and canvas tents clinging to existence at 14,000 feet. The wind didn't howl here, it screamed. It was a physical force, an invisible hand that shoved against everything and everyone, threatening to peel the base off the mountainside and hurl it into the valleys below. Inside the Tactical Operations Center, the air was thick with the smell of bad coffee and stale sweat. A dozen men hunched over glowing computer screens, monitoring feeds from drones that circled somewhere in the darkness above. Maps covered the walls, marked with grids and coordinates that meant life or death. Captain Alara Vance stood at attention in front of the mission briefing table, her hands clasped behind her back. She was 29 years old with a lean, angular frame that spoke of someone who had spent years carrying heavy loads up steep inclines. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun. Her face was unremarkable except for her eyes, which were the color of winter ice and just as unforgiving. Major Garrett Caldwell stood on the opposite side of the table, his finger tapping a digital map displayed on the screen. He was 48, with silver threading through his close-cropped hair, and the kind of weathered face that came from 2 decades of military service in places that didn't appear on tourist brochures. He wore his authority like a second skin, comfortable and absolute. Operation Obsidian, Caldwell began, his voice carrying the clipped efficiency of a man who had given 10,000 briefings. Target is a high-value individual, codenamed Scorpion, currently holed up in this village. He tapped the map. The village appeared as a cluster of brown squares nestled in a valley surrounded by jagged peaks. SEAL Team Viper 21 will insert via helicopter at 0400 Zulu, extract the target, and exfiltrate to this LZ. He zoomed out, revealing the larger terrain. A ridge overlooked the village from the north. Captain Vance, you'll provide overwatch from here. He tapped a point marked OP Alpha. Observation Post Alpha. Range to target, 1,200 meters. Good elevation. Standard engagement distance. Ilara's eyes flickered across the map, tracing the contour lines, reading the terrain like a language only she understood. Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Sir, she said quietly, OP Alpha is exposed. Caldwell looked up. Intel says the area is clear. With respect, sir, it's the most obvious high ground in the sector. If the target has any security worth their salt, they'll have that ridge pre-sighted for mortars. Anyone sitting there is going to be in a kill zone. Caldwell's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes, concern masquerading as irritation. And frankly, 1,200 meters is appropriate for the conditions. Weather forecast shows a storm system moving in. Visibility is going to deteriorate rapidly. Sir, I've qualified at 2,400 meters in adverse conditions. On a range, Caldwell cut her off. This is combat. different variables. You'll have wind shear, atmospheric interference, potential enemy counterfire. 1,200 meters gives you a margin of safety. Alara's knuckles whitened behind her back, but her face remained neutral. Understood, sir. Master Chief Declan Reeves stood near the corner of the room, arms crossed over his chest. He was 39, built like a fire hydrant wrapped in muscle and scar tissue, with a beard that violated at least 3 grooming regulations. His eyes moved between Caldwell and Alara like a spectator at a tennis match. Captain Vance's record speaks for itself, sir, Reeves offered. If she thinks there's a problem with the OP... I appreciate your input, Chief, Caldwell said, his tone making it clear he didn't. But tactics are my call. Captain Vance will occupy OP Alpha and provide overwatch as briefed.
Any questions? Alara's jaw worked silently for a moment, then... No, sir.
Good. Wheels up in 6 hours. Dismissed. The room emptied quickly, bodies filing out into the freezing darkness. Alara lingered, staring at the map on the screen. Her finger traced the ridge marked OP Alpha, then drifted higher, to a jagged peak marked with elevation lines so tight they nearly merged into a solid black mass. Devil's Tooth. 14,200 feet, nearly 3,000 feet above the valley floor, and 3,180 meters from the village. Captain. She turned. Caldwell stood in the doorway, his silhouette backlit by the harsh fluorescence of the hallway. A word. She followed him outside, into the wind. They walked until they were alone, standing beside a HESCO barrier that vibrated with each gust. Caldwell didn't look at her. He looked out at the mountains, their peaks lost in the darkness. Your father, he said quietly. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Vance. Alara's breath caught. Sir? I served with him. Desert Storm. He was my platoon leader. Caldwell's voice was distant, pulled back into memory. January 91. We got ambushed outside Basra. Insurgents had us pinned in a street. Your father, he didn't wait for orders. He grabbed a SAW and pushed through the kill zone. Drew their fire. Got us out. He finally looked at her. He died covering our extraction. The wind filled the silence between them. I didn't know you served with him, Alara managed. I didn't make the connection until I reviewed your file this morning, saw your birth date, realized you would have been, 8 years old when we lost him? 8, yes, sir. Caldwell nodded slowly. I owe your father my life, Captain, which is why I need you to understand something. He turned to face her fully. Putting you at OP Alpha isn't about doubting your abilities. It's about keeping you as safe as possible while still accomplishing the mission. Your father took risks, big ones, and I'm standing here because of them. But he's not. Alara's throat tightened. Sir, I didn't join the army to be kept safe. No, you joined to finish what he started. I get that. Caldwell's expression softened, just fractionally. But I can't send Marcus Vance's daughter into an unnecessary risk. Not on my watch. Do you understand? She understood. She understood that he was trying to protect her. That his concern came from a place of debt and honor. That in his mind, keeping her out of danger was the same as honoring her father's sacrifice. But she also understood that 12 SEAL operators were about to walk into a valley, and if OP Alpha was compromised, she wouldn't be able to save them from 1,200 meters. I understand, sir, she said. Caldwell studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. Good. Get some rest, Captain. Long night ahead. He walked away, disappearing into the maze of HESCO barriers and canvas. Alara stood alone in the wind, her hands balled into fists. She didn't return to her tent immediately. Instead, she walked to the edge of the base, where the ground dropped away into a sheer cliff face. Below, invisible in the darkness, was a valley that had swallowed empires. Above, the stars were so bright they hurt to look at, undimmed by the light pollution that had turned American skies into a dull gray haze. She pulled a photograph from the pocket of her jacket. It was worn, the edges soft from years of handling. The image showed a little girl sitting on the shoulders of a man in desert camouflage. The girl was laughing, her hands buried in the man's hair. The man was smiling up at her, his face young and unlined. 8 years old. She remembered that day. It was 2 weeks before he deployed to Iraq. He'd taken her to the range, let her fire his pistol with his hands steadying hers. The recoil had scared her, and she'd cried. He'd melt down, wiping her tears. It's okay to be scared, baby girl, he'd said. Scared means you understand what you're holding. Scared means you respect it. I don't want you to go, she'd whispered. I know, but some things are more important than what we want. You understand? She hadn't, not then, but she understood now. Alara tucked the photo back into her pocket and walked toward the armory. The armory was a shipping container bolted to a concrete pad, guarded by a bored private who barely glanced at her ID before waving her through. Inside, the air smelled of gun oil and metal. Racks of rifles lined the walls, each one tagged and accounted for. Her rifle waited in its case, a modified .375 Chi-Tac intervention, a beast of a weapon that weighed 30 pounds unloaded. The barrel was fluted to save weight, the stock adjustable, the scope a Nightforce ATACR that cost more than a used car. It was capable of reaching out past 2,000 meters in the right hands. In her hands, it had touched targets at 2,400. She assembled it methodically, each piece clicking into place with the satisfaction of precision engineering. Bolt, magazine, scope, bipod, 50 rounds of match-grade ammunition, each one hand-loaded for consistency, ballistic coefficient optimized, weight verified to within a tenth of a grain. She packed her ruck with surgical precision, thermal layers, survival gear, water, MREs she wouldn't eat, a first aid kit she hoped she wouldn't need, and, hidden at the bottom beneath a poncho liner, a small green oxygen canister with a nasal cannula. Unauthorized. Unnecessary for a mission at 1,200 meters, but if someone were climbing to 14,000 feet? She sealed the ruck and shouldered it. 80 pounds. She'd carried worse. On her way out, she stopped at a field desk and pulled out a piece of paper. She wrote quickly, her handwriting cramped and hurried. If you're reading this, I chose the hard way. I'm sorry for disobeying orders, but I couldn't live with the alternative. OP Alpha is compromised. I know it. I can feel it. If I'm wrong, court-martial me. If I'm right, I saved 12 lives. Either way, I did what Dad taught me. Protect your people, no matter the cost. EV. She folded the letter, sealed it in an envelope, and tucked it into her tent. If she came back, she'd destroy it. If she didn't, someone would find it. Either way, the choice was made. 0200 hours Zulu time. The base was asleep. Guard shifts changed, generators hummed. Somewhere, someone was snoring loud enough to wake the dead. Alara Vance slipped out of her tent, ruck on her back, rifle in its case. She moved through the shadows like a ghost, avoiding the pools of light cast by the scattered LEDs that illuminated the pathways between the tents. She reached the perimeter without being challenged. The guard post was manned by a soldier who was doing an admirable job of pretending to be awake. She moved past him, staying low, using the HESCO barriers as cover, and then she was outside the wire. The mountain rose before her, a wall of rock and ice that disappeared into the darkness. Somewhere up there, invisible and waiting, was Devil's Tooth. She checked her watch. 4 hours until the seal insertion. 4 hours to climb 3,000 vertical feet in the dark in sub-zero temperatures, carrying 80 pounds. She'd done harder things. She started climbing. The first hour was rock, granite faces slick with ice, holds that crumbled under her fingers, vertical pitches that required her to chimney her body between narrow crevices. The ruck tried to pull her backward. The rifle case caught on every protrusion. Her breath came in ragged gasps that turned to ice crystals before they dissipated. She climbed anyway. The second hour was ice. Frozen waterfalls that required crampons and ice axes. Every movement calculated. Every placement of her feet a negotiation with gravity. The wind picked up, shoving her sideways, trying to peel her off the mountain. Her hands went numb inside her gloves. She climbed anyway. The third hour was when the altitude started to bite. Her Garmin watch flashed a warning. O2, saturation 84%, mild hypoxia. Her thoughts began to slow, becoming sticky and disconnected. She pulled out the oxygen canister and fitted the nasal cannula, taking shallow sips of bottled air. It helped, barely. She climbed anyway. Memories surfaced unbidden, pulled from the depths by oxygen deprivation and exhaustion. Her father teaching her to shoot, the weight of the rifle in her 12-year-old hands, his voice patient and steady. Breathe in, halfway out, hold, squeeze, don't pull. The funeral. The flag, folded into a triangle. The officer kneeling before her mother, his voice formal and empty. On behalf of a grateful nation. Her first qualification. The target at 1,000 meters, a tiny black circle against a tan background. The instructor watching through a spotting scope. Send it. The rifle bucking, the long wait, then hit, center mass. The instructor lowering his binoculars. Your father would be proud. She'd cried that night, not from joy, from the realization that he would never know. At 13,000 feet, the thoughts turned darker. Doubt crept in like the cold, insidious and patient. What if Caldwell is right? What if I'm throwing away my career for nothing? What if OP Alpha is safe and I'm just paranoid? What if I die up here, alone, and they never find my body? She stopped climbing, pressed her forehead against the frozen rock. Her lungs burned, her legs shook. What if I fail? Then, from somewhere deep in her memory, her father's voice. The hard choice is usually the right one, Ellie. If it was easy, they wouldn't need people like us. She lifted her head. Above her, the Devil's Tooth loomed, a jagged spire of rock silhouetted against the stars. She climbed anyway. 0400. Hours, Zulu time. She reached the peak as the first hint of dawn touched the eastern horizon. The Devil's Tooth was a narrow ledge of shale and ice, barely wide enough to lie prone, exposed to the wind on all sides. The temperature was minus 15 degrees Fahrenheit, not counting wind chill. Her Garmin now read O2, saturation, 82%, altitude, 14,217 feet. She was at the edge of human endurance. She deployed her rifle with fingers that no longer had feeling. The bipod legs dug into the frozen gravel. She pressed her eye to the scope and began to scan the valley below. Through the thermal lens, the world was a wash of grays and whites. Cold was black. Heat was white. Everything else was a gradient between. She found the village. A cluster of heat-leaking structures huddled against the cold, maybe 40 buildings total. Smoke rose from a few chimneys, hot plumes that showed bright white in the thermal spectrum. She panned right, toward the ridge designated as OP Alpha, the spot where Caldwell had ordered her to be. Her breath hitched. 3 distinct white blobs. Heat signatures. Lying prone. Waiting. I knew it, she whispered, her voice stolen by the wind. Enemy spotters. They were set up exactly where she was supposed to be. If she had followed orders, she'd be dead right now, throat cut before she even unslung her rifle. She panned wider, her heart rate spiking despite the cold. To the west of the village, in a dried-up riverbed that offered perfect defilade, 5 more heat signatures. A machine gun team, judging by the cluster pattern. On the roof of the largest building in the village, 2 more. One held a tube. RPG. And on the far ridge, almost invisible in a shadowed draw, another team. Mortar, probably. Her tactical mind assembled the picture instantly. It wasn't just an ambush. It was an L-shaped kill zone. The team at OP Alpha was the anvil. The riverbed team was the hammer. The RPG and mortar were there to finish anyone who tried to run. Viper 21 was walking into a meat grinder. Her thumb hovered over her radio's push-to-talk button. She should call it in, abort the mission, trap detected. But if she transmitted now, the enemy on OP Alpha would intercept the signal strength. They'd know someone was close. They might trigger the ambush early, or worse, vanish and reappear when the SEALs were even more exposed. The mission brief echoed in her head. Maintain radio silence until contact. She was 3,180 meters from the village,
3,180 meters from the enemy, 2 miles. She pulled out her ballistic calculator, her fingers clumsy on the keypad. The numbers on the screen were terrifying. Range, 3,180 meters. Vertical drop, 40 inches. Time of flight, 5.8 seconds. Wind, 18 miles per hour, gusting to 25. Direction 270 degrees. At this distance, the Coriolis effect from the Earth's rotation would pull the bullet right. The spin drift from the rifling would pull it further right. The crosswind was pushing left. The temperature differential between the warm valley floor and the freezing peak would create thermal layers that would bend the bullet's path. She wasn't just shooting at a target. She was solving a three-dimensional calculus problem where the answer was measured in human lives. She adjusted her scope turret. Click, click, click. 60 minutes of angle of elevation. She was aiming at a point in the sky so high above the village it felt absurd. This wasn't sniping. This was artillery with a shoulder-fired rifle. In the valley below, she heard it before she saw it. The deep, rhythmic thump of rotor blades cutting through thin air. The Chinook, inbound with Viper 21. The trap was set. And Alara Vance was the only variable the enemy hadn't accounted for. She settled into her shooting position. The frozen shale bit into her elbows. The wind tried to shove her sideways. Her heart rate slowed from training and discipline, dropping into the zone where every beat was a metronome, counting down to the moment of truth. She watched through the scope as the Chinook descended into the valley, its twin rotors churning the air into a visible vortex of dust and snow. Fast ropes deployed, dark shapes slid down, 12 men dropping into the darkness with the practiced efficiency of 100 insertions before this one. The helicopter climbed away, its engines fading into the distance. The valley fell silent. Ilera watched Master Chief Reeves organize his team on the ground, hand signals directing them into a movement formation. They began to advance toward the village, staying low, using the terrain for cover. They had no idea. She shifted her aim to OP Alpha. The 3 enemy spotters hadn't moved. They were disciplined, professional. They were waiting for the silence, for the SEALs to get deeper into the kill zone. On the roof of the target building, the RPG gunner stood, hefting the tube onto his shoulder. Ilera's crosshairs settled on him, not on his body. At 3,000 meters, a human torso was a speck of dust. She aimed at the wall beneath him, calculating that the spalling and impact would force him down. Her finger rested on the trigger, 2 pounds of pressure away from changing everything. "This is insane," a voice whispered in her head. "The distance is impossible. The variables are infinite. You'll miss. You'll give away your position. You'll die up here for nothing." Then, cutting through the doubt, clear as a bell, her father's voice. "The hard choice is usually the right one." She exhaled, emptying her lungs completely until there was nothing left. The respiratory pause, the moment between heartbeats where the body becomes still. Hold. Hold. Down in the valley, the silence broke. The RPG launched from the rooftop, a streak of white-hot light that slammed into the lead element of the SEAL stack. The explosion bloomed bright in her thermal scope, washing out the image for a split second. Then chaos. "Contact! Contact front!" Reeves' voice screamed over the radio. "Man down! We are taking heavy fire from the east!" Machine gun tracers poured from the riverbed, green lines of fire stitching across the village square. The SEALs dove for cover, but the cover was disintegrating around them, mud walls exploding into dust under the weight of fire. "Taking fire from the ridge!" another voice shouted. "They're high! They have the high ground!" The 3 spotters at OP Alpha opened up, plunging fire down onto the pinned team. The SEALs were caught in the open, taking hits from 2 angles. "TAC, Viper 21, we are combat ineffective," Reeves screamed. "Need immediate CAS." Caldwell's voice came back, clipped and helpless. "Negative, Viper. Birds are grounded. Weather is 0-0 at the pass. You are on your own." "We can't move. We have casualties." Alara's crosshairs had never left the RPG gunner. He was reloading, standing tall, thinking he was the king of the battlefield. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle didn't just fire. It detonated. The muzzle brake vented gases to the sides with enough force to kick up a cloud of snow around her. The recoil slammed into her shoulder like a mule kick, rattling her teeth. 1 Mississippi.
She cycled the bolt immediately, the spent brass casing tumbling into the snow, still hot enough to hiss. 2 Mississippi. Through the scope, the RPG gunner stood, oblivious, hefting his reloaded weapon. 3 Mississippi. Alara didn't wait to see the impact. At nearly 6 seconds of flight time, waiting was a luxury. She shifted aim to the machine gun nest in the riverbed. 4 Mississippi. 5 Mississippi. Down in the valley, the wall beneath the RPG gunner exploded. Not from an explosive round, but from the sheer kinetic energy of a 350-grain solid copper projectile traveling faster than sound. The stone shattered into 1,000 high-velocity fragments. The gunner, caught in the spray of rock shrapnel, was thrown backward off the roof as if yanked by an invisible cable. He vanished. "What the hell was that?" a SEAL voice gasped over the radio. "Mortars?" Alara was already on her next target. The PKM machine gunner in the riverbed, dug in deep, belt-fed rounds chewing apart the mud wall that was the only thing keeping Viper 21 alive. Range, 3,190 meters. Wind, shifted left, quarter value. Hold, 2.5 mils right for spindrift, another 0.5 mil for Coriolis. She exhaled. The world stopped. She squeezed. Boom! The rifle spoke again, a voice of thunder that rolled across the mountains. The recoil was a familiar violence now, absorbed and accepted. 1 Mississippi. 2 Mississippi. Down in the valley, the PKM gunner held his trigger down, spent brass raining around him. 3 Mississippi. 4 Mississippi. Alara's eye never left the scope. Her world had narrowed to a circle of glass, a tiny window into a universe of wind and ballistics and human fragility. 5 Mississippi. The impact was less spectacular than the RPG shot, but far more lethal. The rounds struck the receiver of the machine gun, shattering the weapon and the man behind it in a spray of sparks and metal fragments. The relentless hammering stopped instantly. "Gun down!" someone shouted on the SEAL net. "The gun is down! Who hit that?" Reeves' voice, breathless and disbelieving. "I don't know, but don't stop to ask questions. Suppress the ridge." Alara didn't wait for them to figure it out. She keyed her radio for the first time, her voice cutting through the chaos like a surgical blade. "Viper 21, this is Sierra 10. Keep your heads down." Static. Then, "Sierra? Who the hell is this? We have no air assets in the sector." "You have me," Alara said simply. "Do not move." "Where are you?" Reeves demanded. "What's your position?" "High enough." She cycled the bolt again. Brass tumbled into the growing pile beside her. The metal was so cold it burned even through her gloves. 3 rounds fired, 37 left. And the battle had only just begun. The SEALs weren't moving. Combat inertia had locked them in place behind the crumbling mud wall, their training screaming at them to stay in cover while bullets chewed the air above their heads. It was safer to stay put than to run into the open. But staying put meant dying slowly. Alara watched through her scope as the enemy at OP Alpha adjusted their fire, walking rounds down the length of the wall. In 30 seconds, maybe less, they'd find the angle. They'd punch through. And 12 American soldiers would bleed out in Afghan dirt. "Viper 21, move to your 3 o'clock, she transmitted, her voice steady despite the screaming wind. "There's a rock formation 50 meters east. Move now." "Who is this?" Reeves demanded again, his voice bordering on hysteria. "Identify yourself." "I am the reason you're still breathing, Chief. Now move." They hesitated. She could see it in their body language, the way they pressed tighter against the disintegrating wall instead of breaking for the rocks. Fear was a rational response to bullets, but fear would kill them just as dead as the bullets would. Alara made a decision that would either save them or court-martial her. She aimed not at the enemy, but at a massive granite boulder 10 meters to the right of the SEAL position, the direction they needed to go. She fired. The rifle's roar was lost in the wind. The bullet flew its impossible arc, riding thermals and crosswinds, dancing through the chaos of atmospheric physics. 6 seconds of flight time felt like 6 hours. Then the boulder exploded. Not literally, but the impact of 350 grains of copper traveling at 2,800 feet per second, hitting solid granite, created an effect that might as well have been explosive. Stone fragments sprayed outward in a deadly cone. The sound was like a car crash condensed into a microsecond. The SEALs, thinking they were taking flanking fire, scrambled away from the impact, away from the wall, toward the rocks, exactly where Alara wanted them to go. "Incoming! Taking fire from the flank!" someone screamed. "No, you idiots," Alara muttered, already tracking her next target.
"I'm helping you." The team broke cover in a disciplined rush, weapons up, suppressing fire snapping toward shadows that held no enemies. They dove behind the rock formation just as a mortar round landed precisely where they'd been standing 5 seconds earlier. The explosion shook the valley floor, turning the mud wall into an expanding cloud of dust and pulverized brick. If they'd stayed, they would have ceased to exist. "Good effect on target," Alara whispered to herself, marking the mortar team's position based on the launch flash she'd caught in her peripheral vision. "TAC to Viper 21. Caldwell's voice cut through the radio traffic. "Seismic sensors just registered an explosion. What's your status?" "We're clear of the initial kill zone," Reeves gasped. "Something heavy is hitting them. It's tearing them apart." "We have no assets in your area, Viper," Caldwell insisted. "Repeat, no friendly fire support available. That fire is not ours." Alara's lips thinned into a grim line. Caldwell was right. To him, she didn't exist. She was a ghost on a mountain, defying physics and direct orders, protected only by the fact that no one knew she was there. She shifted her aim back to the ridge where OP Alpha sat. The 3-man team there was reloading their mortar. They were her next problem. 4 rounds fired, 16 confirmed enemy down or suppressed, 46 rounds remaining. Her shoulder throbbed where the recoil had punished it. Her hands were starting to lose feeling despite the gloves. The cold was seeping through her layers, finding the sweat on her skin and turning it to ice. But the math was working. "Viper 21, she radioed, her voice devoid of emotion. "Watch your 6. I'm clearing the ridge." "Copy that, whoever you are," came the breathless reply. Alara centered her crosshairs on the mortar tube, not on the men operating it. On the ammunition stockpile, she could see through thermal imaging a cluster of bright spots that indicated recently fired rounds still radiating heat. She adjusted for the increased range. 3,400 meters, uphill angle, wind gusting. She exhaled halfway, held, squeezed. The bullet found the stockpile. Physics did the rest. The secondary explosion was visible even without the scope, a white bloom of fire that climbed into the darkening sky. The mortar crew vaporized. The shockwave rippled through the loose scree of the ridge, triggering a small avalanche that buried what remained. "Target neutralized," Alara said, her voice mechanical, clinical. "Viper 21 confirms secondary explosion," Reeves shouted. "That ridge is clear. We are moving to extraction point." "Sierra," he added, his tone shifting. "Who are you?" Alara didn't answer. She couldn't, because the mountain was waking up. The wind shifted. It didn't just change direction, it attacked. A gust of 60 miles per hour slammed into the Devil's Tooth, carrying with it a wall of ice crystals so dense it looked like television static. The White Wall. The atmospheric war that turned sniping from a science into a prayer. In seconds, the valley floor, 3,000 meters below, vanished. Her thermal scope, usually able to pierce darkness and light fog, struggled against the wall of frozen moisture. The crisp images of the SEALs and the remaining enemy positions became ghostly, shapeless smears. "The White Wall," Alara muttered. Her Kestrel weather meter spun wildly. Wind speed maxed out the sensor at 45 miles per hour, but she could feel it was stronger. The barometric pressure was crashing. The temperature had dropped 10 degrees in 5 minutes. Every calculation she'd made was now garbage. "TAC to Viper 21, Caldwell's voice was sharp with anxiety. "Satellite feed is down. We are blind. Repeat, we are blind. What is your status?" "We're moving blind too, TAC, Reeves shouted over the howl of wind. "Visibility is 0. We're taking sporadic fire from the north." Alara pressed her eye harder into the scope's eyepiece, as if physical force could clear the thermal wash. She could see movement. Faint gray smudges against a slightly darker background. Enemy reinforcements, using the blizzard as cover to flank the SEALs. She looked at her dope card, the laminated chart of corrections taped to her rifle stock.
All the numbers were based on conditions that no longer existed. The wind could push her bullet 30 feet off target. She could hit a seal. She could hit nothing. She could reveal her position and die without accomplishing anything. She dialed her windage turret left. 4 full minutes of angle. A massive correction that felt wrong, felt reckless. But the alternative was watching 12 men die. "I see them," she whispered to no one. She focused on the largest smudge of heat. She couldn't see a head or chest, just thermal signature bleeding through the storm. Trust the math. No, math was dead. Trust the gut. She squeezed. The rifle roared. The muzzle flash was instantly swallowed by the white wall. The sound was torn away by the gale before it could echo. 6 seconds of flight time. In those 6 seconds, the wind gusted, died, gusted again. The bullet surfed chaos. Down in the valley, the gray smudge didn't drop. Miss. The word landed like a physical blow. Alara had fired thousands of rounds in her career. She'd missed before, of course, everyone missed, but not when it mattered, not when lives hung on every trigger pull. "Taking fire, left flank!" Reeves yelled. Alara's jaw clenched. She racked the bolt, ejecting the spent casing. Her hand moved to the windage turret. Where did it go? No impact splash. The snow hid everything. She corrected. 2 more clicks left. Elevation down 1 click. She fired again.
6 seconds of religious faith in physics she couldn't see.
This time, the gray smudge split apart. 1 heat signature dropped. The other scattered. "Hit! Target down!" Reeves called out. "Keep it coming, Sierra!" But the enemy wasn't stupid. The distinctive crack of a .375 Shytac carried even through a blizzard. It was a sound that didn't belong in nature, a thunderclap that rolled down from the heavens. They knew the fire was coming from the high peaks, and they had mortars left. Thump. 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 Alara heard the distant discharges even over the wind, not from the destroyed ridge, from the far side of the valley, hidden positions she hadn't spotted. Counter-battery fire. They were walking rounds up the mountain toward her. The first round impacted 500 meters below her position, a puff of gray smoke, barely visible through the storm. The second round hit 300 meters below. They were bracketing her elevation. She didn't move. She couldn't. If she broke position to seek cover, she'd lose visual on the seals. They'd die in the snow, cut down by flanking fire she could have prevented. "Come on," she gritted out through clenched teeth, lining up her next shot on the enemy fighters closing on Reeves' position. "Do your worst." She fired her 6th shot of the engagement. Another hit in the valley, another heat signature extinguished. Then, the mountain exploded. The enemy mortar round didn't hit her directly. It impacted 50 meters above her perch, striking the granite face of the Devil's Tooth. The concussion wave in the thin air was brutal. Rock shards rained down like shrapnel, pinging off her helmet, shredding her jacket. The shockwave lifted her chest off the ground and slammed her back down onto the ice-covered shale. Her vision went white. A high-pitched ringing drowned out the wind, drowned out the world. She gasped, tasting copper. Blood was dripping from her nose onto the frozen stock of the rifle. "Sierra! Sierra!" Reeves' voice was a tiny buzzing in her ear, barely audible through the tinnitus. Alara shook her head, trying to clear the stars dancing across her vision. Her hands were shaking, not from cold, from the concussion rattling her brain inside her skull. She reached up with a trembling hand and wiped blood from her nose with her glove. The smear was dark against the white fabric. She forced her eye back to the scope. The lens was cracked along the edge, a spiderweb fracture that split her view. But the reticle held true. "Still here," she rasped, keying the mic for the first time in minutes. Her voice was thick, slurred, concussed. "We thought we lost you," Reeves said, and there was genuine relief in his tone. "Not yet," Alara replied. She spat blood into the snow beside her. She scanned the far ridge through her damaged scope. The mortar team that had nearly killed her was setting up for another volley. They had her range now. The next one wouldn't be 50 meters high. It would be on her lap. She had to kill them before they reloaded. Distance, 3,400 meters, uphill angle, through a blizzard, with a concussion. Impossible. Major Caldwell would call it impossible. Ilara narrowed her eyes, the pain sharpening her focus into a single razor-edged point. "Watch me," she whispered. She centered the crosshairs on the clustered heat signatures, 4 men working in practice coordination, loading, aiming, preparing to send high-explosive death arcing through the sky. She adjusted for maximum elevation. The wind was pure chaos now, shifting second by second. There was no calculation that would account for it, so she stopped calculating. She breathed. She felt the rifle. She became part of the mountain, part of the storm, part of the weapon itself. The trigger broke clean. The bullet climbed into the white wall and disappeared. Ilara counted. Not Mississippi's, just numbers. 1,
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The mortar team's ammunition stockpile detonated. The explosion was larger this time, the bright flash visible even through the blizzard as multiple rounds cooked off in a chain reaction. The thermal bloom expanded like a white ink blot on her scope. The threat was gone. But so was her position's secrecy. Every enemy fighter in the valley now knew exactly where she was. "Viper 21, this is TAC," Caldwell's voice cut through. "We have multiple thermal contacts converging on grid 42. That's your position, Sierra. You need to displace. Now." Ilara looked down at the valley. Through the gaps in the storm, she could see Reeves and his team moving toward the extraction point. They were carrying wounded, moving slow. Still 12 minutes from the LZ. If she displaced now, they'd be exposed, unprotected. "Negative TAC," she said. "I hold this position until Viper is wheels up." "Captain Vance," Caldwell's voice changed. He knew. "That's an order. Fall back." "With respect, sir, no." Silence on the radio. Then, "God damn it, Vance, you're going to get yourself killed." "Maybe," she said, "but not before I finish the job." She shifted aim toward the valley floor. New targets were emerging from buildings, scrambling through the snow. A technical, a beat-up Toyota pickup with a heavy machine gun mounted in the bed, bounced over rough terrain toward the extraction point. Range, 2,800 meters. Moving target. Lateral speed, approximately 15 miles per hour. She'd have to lead it by 6 mils. Aim at empty air and trust the truck would drive into the bullet. Her right hand cramped as she worked the bolt. The recoil had been punishing it for the last 20 shots, and the cold was making everything worse. She looked down at her glove. It was torn. Not from the mortar shrapnel, from her own desperate movements. The fabric underneath was soaked dark. She pulled the glove off with her teeth. The skin of her palm was flayed open, raw flesh exposed to the -20-degree air. The friction of gripping the rifle, combined with the frozen metal, had torn through skin like sandpaper. Pain, sharp and immediate, cut through the concussion fog. Good. Pain meant she was still alive. Pain meant her nervous system worked. She slammed a fresh magazine into the rifle. The cold plastic felt brittle, ready to shatter. She had started with 7 magazines of 7 rounds each, plus 1 in the chamber. 50 total. She looked at the pile of spent brass in the snow. 12 casings. No, 15. The concussion had made her lose count. She was burning through ammunition too fast. 1 shot, 1 kill, she reminded herself. The sniper's mantra. But this wasn't sniping anymore. This was a brawl. This was survival. "Sierra, we have technicals approaching from the south road," Reeves called. 2 vehicles. They're closing fast. Ilara found them in her scope. 2 trucks. The lead vehicle had a DSHK heavy machine gun, a Soviet-era beast that could punch through engine blocks and concrete walls with equal ease. She didn't aim for the gunner. The truck was bouncing too much. She aimed for the engine block. The .375 Chi-Tak was designed for this. Anti-materiel, disabling vehicles and equipment. She led the target by 6 mils, a massive lead. She was aiming at empty space, trusting the truck would intercept the bullet. The raw flesh of her palm screamed as she squeezed the trigger. The recoil jarred her injured hand, sending a spike of agony up her arm that threatened to white out her vision. She stifled a scream, bit down on her lip until she tasted fresh blood. 6 seconds later, the lead truck slewed violently to the right. Steam and black smoke erupted from the hood as the solid copper projectile punched through the radiator, the engine block, and the firewall in a straight line of catastrophic damage. The vehicle flipped, rolling once, twice, shedding parts and bodies before coming to rest upside down. The second truck slammed on its brakes, swerving to avoid the wreckage. "Lead vehicle destroyed," Ilara reported.
Her voice trembled despite her efforts to control it. Good hit, Reeves cheered. Second vehicle is stopping. They're dismounting. They're not stopping, Alara corrected, watching the thermal signatures spill out of the truck. They're deploying. Infantry. Squad-sized element. 8 to 10 fighters spreading out in a textbook assault formation. She looked at her magazine. 3 rounds left. She ejected it and grabbed a fresh one. Her fingers were stiff, clumsy claws. She fumbled the magazine. It fell into the snow. No. She grabbed another magazine from her vest, slammed it home. The cold plastic bit into her torn palm. Sierra, we are pinned by the dismounts, Reeves' voice was urgent. We need suppression.
Alara scanned the enemy formation. 8 fighters, moving by pairs, using cover effectively. She had 23 rounds left in her current loadout, maybe 30 total if she could find the dropped magazine in the snow. 23 rounds to cover 12 more minutes of movement, less than 2 rounds per minute. Her breathing was becoming labored, not from exertion. The altitude and the cold were catching up with her. Her Garmin watch flashed red. O2 saturation, 78%. Critical hypoxia. Her thoughts were slowing. The ballistic calculations that had been second nature were now impossible. The numbers swam when she tried to focus on them. She lined up on a prone figure, setting up what looked like a PKM machine gun. Exhale, hold, squeeze. The bullet hit 3 feet high. She stared at the impact splash, blinking slowly. She'd aimed center mass. The shot should have been perfect. What happened? She tried to do the math, recalculate, but the numbers wouldn't stay still. They detached from the turret markings and floated in the air like hallucinations. Sierra, that was high, Reeves called. Adjust down. Copy, Alara mumbled. Her tongue felt too large for her mouth. She reached for the elevation turret. Her hand, wrapped in the torn glove with blood freezing on the fabric, moved in slow motion. Count the clicks. 1, 2, wait. Was that 2 clicks down or 2 clicks up? She shook her head violently. The motion made the world tilt. A wave of nausea rolled over her. Focus. She had to focus. But the world was graying at the edges. Tunnel vision. The darkness creeping in from the periphery, closing in on her life like a camera aperture stopping down. Just close your eyes, a soft voice whispered. Not external, internal. Her own exhausted brain offering escape. Alara shook her head violently again. The motion sent fresh blood dripping from her nose. She needed pain. Pain was clarity. She bit down on her lower lip, hard. Felt the skin break. Tasted the warm metallic flow. She kept biting until the sharp, stinging agony cut through the hypoxia-induced haze like a signal flare through fog. I am here, she snarled through bloody teeth. I am awake. She centered the crosshairs on the lead infantryman advancing on the SEAL position. She didn't calculate wind. She didn't adjust for distance. She just felt it. The wind is there. The target is there. The bullet goes here. Boom. The recoil rocked her. She rode it like a wave, letting it pass through her instead of fighting it. 6 seconds later, the lead figure crumpled. Hit! Reeves yelled. He's down. Sierra, you still with us? I'm awake, Alara whispered to herself. She spat a glob of blood onto the snow. I'm awake. She cycled the bolt. The movement was jerky, uncoordinated. Her hands weren't obeying commands properly anymore. But the bolt moved. The casing ejected. A fresh round chambered. 18 rounds left. But the effort of that single shot had cost her. Her vision grayed out for a full second before returning. She was redlining. She was a machine running without oil, metal grinding against metal, seconds from catastrophic failure. "TAC to Viper," Caldwell's voice broke through. "We have a drone overhead in 2 minutes. Hang on." 2 minutes is too long, Reeves replied. "They're flanking right." Alara shifted her aim right. Her arms trembled uncontrollably. The reticle danced across the target area like a drunk trying to thread a needle. Sensation had abandoned her hands. The rifle felt impossibly heavy. Her muscles were failing. Stabilize. Improvise. She jammed her left fist under the stock of the rifle, using her own broken flesh and bone as a makeshift sandbag. The metal dug into her torn palm. The pain was excruciating, but the weapon steadied. 2 minutes, she wheezed into the radio. I can give you 2 minutes. She lined up the next shot. Her vision flickered. Get out of my head, she hissed, and pulled the trigger. The bullet found its mark,
Another enemy fighter down, 17 rounds. The world was narrowing, time was stretching. Each second felt like an hour. Each heartbeat was a drum that threatened to stop. But the SEALs were moving. She could see them through the scope, thermal signatures hustling toward the extraction point. They were close now, so close. Viper 21 approaching LZ, Reeves transmitted. 90 seconds to pick up. 90 seconds. Alara could do 90 seconds. She'd done harder things. She fired again, and again, and again. The shots blurred together. She stopped counting rounds, stopped counting kills. She just worked the bolt and pulled the trigger, a machine carrying out its function, refusing to acknowledge that machines could fail. The helicopter appeared through the storm like a dragon emerging from clouds. The MH-47 Chinook, call sign Night Stalker, its twin rotors churning the snow into a blinding vortex. It hovered, the rear ramp skimming the frozen ground. "Bird is down! Move! Move! Move!" Reeves screamed. The SEALs sprinted for the ramp. Alara watched them go, covering their movement, her rifle barking methodically. She saw movement. Final enemy push. 4 fighters charging the helicopter in a suicide run. They knew if the Americans got on that bird, it was over. Alara engaged, dropped the first one, cycled the bolt, dropped the second. 2 left. 10 meters from the ramp, she pulled the trigger. Click. The sound was hollow, mechanical, final, empty. The magazine was dry. "No," she gasped. On the scope, the last 2 fighters raised their weapons toward the exposed SEALs on the ramp. Alara did the only thing she could. She grabbed her radio. "Behind you!" Reeves spun, drew his sidearm, fired 3 times in rapid succession. Both fighters dropped at the base of the ramp. "Clear! We're clear! Go, go, go!" The Chinook's engines whined as the pilot pulled power. The massive bird lifted, nose dipping as it gathered speed. Snow swirled in its wake. It banked hard, climbing out of the valley, away from the fire, away from death. Viper 21 was wheels up. They were safe. Alara watched the helicopter disappear into the storm. The thermal signature of its exhaust bloomed bright and beautiful against the frozen sky. Then silence returned. The wind reclaimed the valley. The burning wrecks on the roads below flickered like dying campfires. "Sierra 10, Reeves' voice came back, softer now, nearly drowned by static. "We're clear. Pop smoke. We're sending the bird back for you. Give us your grid." Alara looked at her hands. They were frozen claws, the flesh purple and black. She looked at the rifle. The barrel was radiating heat waves that distorted the air around it. She looked at the terrain below. The enemy was swarming. They were angry. They were looking up. And she knew the fuel range of an MH-47 in this weather. They didn't have the reserves to hover at 14,000 feet, navigate the turbulence, pick her up, and make it back to base. If they tried, they'd crash, kill everyone aboard trying to save one person who was probably already dead. "Negative, Viper," Alara said. Her voice was calm, the calm of a decision made long ago, before she even climbed this mountain. "Say again, Sierra, give us your grid." "Fuel is critical, Viper. RTB. That's a direct order from your on-scene commander." "We're not leaving you," Reeves shouted. "Sierra, we're not—" "You already left, Chief," Alara whispered. She smiled, though no one could see it. "Take care of your boys." She reached down and switched off her radio. The static cut out. The voices ceased. Alara Vance sat alone on the roof of the world. She leaned back against the frozen rock. The wind had stopped feeling cold. That was a bad sign. The worst sign. She watched the helicopter disappear into the clouds, a tiny dark speck that grew smaller and smaller until it was swallowed by the white wall. 39, she whispered to the wind. "I got 39. She closed her eyes and let the mountain decide. 3 minutes and 40 seconds after her heart stopped, it started again. But Alara didn't know that yet. In the space between death and life, there was only the kitchen. The kitchen was sweltering. Alara frowned, looking down at the wooden table. Something was wrong. The roast in the oven was burning. She could smell the char, acrid and bitter. Sweat trickled down her spine, sticky and uncomfortable under too many layers. "It's too hot in here," she complained. Her voice sounded strange, like it was underwater, like she was hearing herself through a wall. "Then take off your coat, Ellie," her father said from the corner. He was sitting in his old reading chair, the one with the worn leather armrests. He smiled over the newspaper. "Why are you wearing a parka in the summer?" "You're right," she murmured. Her hands moved to the zipper of her jacket. "It's suffocating." She pulled the zipper down. Cold air hit her chest. Wait, cold air? In reality, on the jagged spine of Devil's Tooth, the temperature was minus 25 degrees Fahrenheit. The wind chill pushed it to 40 below. Alara Vance was dying. Her body had exhausted its energy reserves trying to shiver. Now the shivering had stopped. Her core temperature had dropped below 90 degrees. The blood vessels in her extremities, which had constricted for hours to save her vital organs, suddenly dilated in a final catastrophic failure of her autonomic nervous system. Paradoxical undressing, the cruel joke of hypothermia. Warm blood from her core rushed to her frozen skin. To Alara's dying brain, it felt like a heat wave, a burning tropical rush. Her stiff, clumsy fingers fumbled with the Velcro storm flap of her jacket. She tore at it with the desperation of someone trapped in a burning building. "Just need air," she slurred. She peeled the jacket open, exposing her base layers to the screaming wind. Snow hit her chest, but it didn't feel cold. It felt like refreshing rain on a summer day. She began to pull her arms out of the sleeves. The jacket caught the wind and flapped violently, threatening to tear away completely. Then a voice cut through the hallucination. Not her father's voice, a different voice, sharp, angry, real. "Vance, God damn it, answer me. Are you alive?" Major Garrett Caldwell's voice crackled through her radio earpiece, fighting against the static and wind. One-way transmission. She'd turned off her transmit function, but receive still worked. His voice was a lifeline she couldn't reach. The kitchen wavered like a mirage. "Command to Sierra 10, Caldwell barked again. "Viper 21 has landed. They are safe. They are screaming for your retrieval. But I can't send a bird if you don't give me a pulse. Do you copy?" The anger in his voice grounded her. It was familiar. It was the same tone he'd used when he told her OP Alpha was safe, when he'd tried to protect her because he owed her father a debt. Spite is a powerful stimulant. Alara blinked. The kitchen dissolved. The yellow walls turned back into gray shale. The smell of burning roast became the acrid scent of ozone and cordite. She looked down at herself. Her jacket was half off. Her chest was covered in snow. Ice crystals clung to her base layer. Realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. "No," she gasped. "No, no, no." She wasn't hot. She was freezing to death. Her body was lying to her, trying to kill her with comfort. With a scream of frustration, she grabbed the flapping jacket. Her hands were useless clubs, devoid of sensation. She had to use her wrists and forearms to wrestle the stiff fabric back over her shoulders. The jacket fought her. The wind fought her. Her own body fought her. Her fingers wouldn't close, wouldn't grip. The zipper was impossible. She curled into a ball on the frozen shale, trapping what little heat remained, hugging herself violently. "I'm here," she whispered, toward the radio clipped to her chest rig. She didn't know if the transmit button was pressed. Her fingers had forgotten how to work. "Vance." Caldwell's voice changed. The hard edge dropped. "Alara, key the mic twice if you can't speak." She tried to press the PTT button. Her thumb mashed against something. Maybe the button. Maybe just the radio housing. "I have a faint carrier wave," Caldwell said. His voice was tense, controlled fear bleeding through his professional calm. "Listen to me. The weather is closing the window fast. I have a drone. A global hawk loitering high. I need a signal. I need you to light up. Light up." The words penetrated slowly. Alara turned her head. Her helmet lay in the snow next to her rifle. Attached to the top rail was an MS-2000 distress strobe, a compact device no bigger than a deck of cards. If she turned it on, the infrared flash would be visible to the drone's sensors. They could get her grid, send a helicopter. But it would also be visible to anyone in the valley with night vision equipment. The enemy was down there, angry, humiliated, looking for the demon who had slaughtered them from an impossible distance. If they saw the strobe, they would send a team, or a mortar, or both. She looked at the Shytac, empty. She looked at her sidearm, a Sig Sauer M18 in a chest holster. She tried to draw it. Her body refused to obey the command. She was defenseless. "If I stay dark, I die," she reasoned. Her thoughts moved like cold honey, slow and sticky. "If I light up, they might kill me." She preferred the bullet to the cold. The cold was a liar. The bullet was honest. Alara rolled onto her stomach. She crawled, dragged her numb legs across the ice. Every movement was a marathon. Every centimeter cost everything. She reached the helmet. The strobe switch was a simple lever covered by a protective cap. She hooked her thumb through the loop and pulled. The cover snapped up. The strobe activated automatically. Flash, flash, flash. To the naked eye in daylight, it would be invisible. Through night vision or infrared sensors, it was a lighthouse beam cutting through the storm. "Strobe on," she croaked. She didn't know if she'd keyed the radio. "I see it," Caldwell's voice erupted with relief. "I have the tally. Grid confirmed. You're at... Jesus Christ, Vance, you're at 14,200 feet. A pause, then quieter. "Hang on, we're working the problem. Don't you dare close your eyes." Alara rolled onto her back. The strobe pulsed rhythmically beside her head, painting the underside of the storm clouds with invisible fire. She stared up at the swirling snow. Each flake was a tiny universe, intricate and perfect, and meaningless. "I'm tired, sir," she whispered. "So tired." "Talk to me, Vance," Caldwell commanded. His voice sounded closer now, desperate to keep the connection alive. "Tell me about the rifle. Tell me about the shots." "The wind," Alara smiled faintly. Her lips were blue and cracked. "The wind is a liar, but if you listen long enough, you learn its language." That's good. Keep talking." But Alara's words were fading. The darkness was rushing in. Not the warm kitchen this time, just a void, empty and patient. Then she heard something, not from the radio, from the mountain below, the crunch of boots on snow. She wasn't alone. Alara rolled her eyes toward the sound. It was all she could move. Her neck muscles had stopped responding. A figure appeared over the lip of the ridge. He was wrapped in ragged wool and a white camouflage smock that blended perfectly with the storm. An Afghan tracker. One of the men who'd survived the valley, who had climbed through the dark and cold to find the demon. He stood, panting, his chest heaving. At this altitude, even the native mountain people struggled. His face was weathered, bearded, hard as the rock itself. He wore night vision goggles. When the strobe pulsed, it lit him up like a searchlight. He flipped the goggles up with a curse, temporarily blinded. He saw her. The American flag patch on her shoulder, the massive rifle lying useless in the snow. A woman, half frozen, jacket open, dying. He didn't look angry. He looked relieved. The hunt was over. "Allahu Akbar," he whispered. His breath formed clouds in the frigid air. He unslung his AK-47. The rifle was old, worn, the wood stock scarred from decades of use and abuse. Alara watched him. There was no fear left. The hypothermia had taken that too, stripped away everything except a dull observational curiosity. So this is how it ends. Not with a bang, with a stranger standing over me on a frozen mountain. "Vance!" Caldwell's voice screamed in her earpiece, the one-way transmission continuing. "I have a thermal contact at your position. 5 meters. Do you copy? Defend yourself." "Can't," Alara thought. Her lips didn't move. The tracker raised his rifle, aimed at her chest. He didn't want to capture her. He wanted to erase her. He pulled the trigger. Click. The sound was small against the wind, insignificant, but to Alara it was the loudest thing in the world. The tracker stared at his weapon. Confusion crossed his face. He racked the charging handle. It moved sluggishly, fighting him. The cheap grease inside the Soviet-made receiver had turned to paste in the extreme cold. The same cold that had seized Alara's rifle hours earlier. He racked it again, pulled the trigger. Click. Alara let out a breath that might have been a laugh if she'd had the strength. The mountain didn't choose sides. It killed everyone equally. The tracker cursed in Pashto. He slung the useless rifle over his shoulder and reached for his belt. He pulled out a curved knife. The blade was old steel, carbon content high enough that it wouldn't shatter in the cold. Blades didn't freeze. Blades didn't jam. He stepped closer, kneeling beside her. His eyes met hers. There was a moment of recognition. 2 soldiers on a frozen peak, both broken by the elements. He raised the knife. Alara closed her eyes. She thought of the kitchen one more time. The warmth. The impossible warmth. Then the world exploded with sound. Thwop, 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 thwop. The vibration came through the rock beneath her before the sound registered. The snow around them suddenly erupted into a violent, swirling hurricane.
The tracker looked up. His eyes widened in terror. Rising from the abyss behind the ridge, emerging from the valley below like a leviathan surfacing from the deep, a massive gray shape crested the cliff edge. An HH-60G Pavehawk helicopter, pararescue variant. The angel of death and salvation wrapped into one machine. It had approached under the cover of the ridgeline, masking its rotor noise until the final second. Now it hovered, its wheels inches from the uneven rock, turbines screaming. The side door was open. A figure in a flight helmet manned an M240 machine gun. He didn't fire at the tracker. He fired next to him, a burst that vaporized the snow 3 feet from the man's position. A warning, a promise. The rotor wash was biblical. It knocked the tracker backward. He scrambled, trying to keep his balance on the ice. The knife tumbled from his grip. He tried to run. The gale from the rotors shoved him like an invisible hand. His feet slid. Alara watched as he tumbled over the edge of the cliff, his scream swallowed by the storm before it could fully form. The mountain had claimed him. 2 figures jumped from the helicopter. They didn't walk. They moved with violent purpose, shapes in bulky gear hitting the ground hard. Para-rescue jumpers, PJs. The only job in the military whose motto was, that others may live. "PJ on deck!" a voice roared over the wind. One of them was on Alara instantly. He blocked the wind with his body. His face was covered by a ballistic mask, only his eyes visible. "I've got you, ma'am. I've got you." His hands moved across her body, assessing, cataloging injuries with practiced speed. He ripped open a medical pouch, didn't waste time with questions. He could see the open jacket, the paradoxical undressing, the blue lips. "She's critical!" he shouted to his partner. "Get the burrito!" The second PJ unfolded a thermal extraction bag, bright orange lined with chemical heating packs. They called it the human burrito. It had saved lives in Antarctica, on Everest, in every frozen hellscape where humans didn't belong. "Captain Vance, can you hear me?" The first PJ's face was inches from hers. "My name is Miller. We're going home. Stay with me." Alara tried to focus on his eyes. They were brown, kind, determined. She tried to point at her rifle. The words wouldn't come, just a wheeze. "The rifle," she managed. Miller looked at the frozen Chi-Tac lying in the snow like a discarded toy. He grabbed it by the barrel and threw it into the back of the helicopter. "Got it. We leave nothing behind. Now let's get you out of here." They rolled her into the thermal bag with efficient brutality. No gentleness, no time for gentleness. The chemical packs activated on contact, burning against her frozen skin. They lifted her. She felt weightless, disconnected from her body. The world tilted as they slid her onto the floor of the Pavehawk. The metal was cold. Then the door gunner threw a blanket over her. "Load and go! Load and go!" Miller shouted. The helicopter banked hard before the PJs were even fully seated. Gravity pressed Alara into the floor. The door gunner kept his weapon trained on the ridge, scanning for threats that never materialized. Alara lay in the thermal bag, the chemical heat starting to penetrate the layers of cold. The vibration of the airframe rattled through her bones. She could hear voices, radio chatter, medical jargon. "Package is secure. Patient is category Alpha. Hypothermic, potential frostbite, altered mental status. We are RTB. Pedro 61, this is TAC. Status on the patient? She's alive, Major, but barely." Alara stared at the ceiling of the helicopter. The adrenaline was gone. The mission was over. The crash was coming. Her heart stuttered, skipped a beat, then another. "Vitals crashing," Miller shouted. His hands moved to her chest, tearing open her base layers. "She's coding. Start CPR." The compressions were brutal. Miller's hands pounded her chest with enough force to crack ribs, hard enough to keep blood moving when the heart had given up. "No pulse. Still no pulse." Miller's voice was controlled desperation. "She's too cold," the second PJ shouted over the engine noise. "Heart won't restart if core temp is below 86. "Drill her. IO access now." Alara felt a dull pressure in her shin as they used a specialized drill to punch a needle directly into her tibia bone marrow. The only way to get drugs into a system that had shut down. "Epinephrine, atropine, push warm saline." Inside Alara's mind, there was no pain, no sensation. Just the kitchen again, her father at the table. "You can rest now, Ellie. You did good." "Did I save them?" "You saved them all."
Then I can sleep? Not yet, baby girl, not yet. Charging defib, 200 joules. Clear! Thud. Ilara's body arched off the metal deck. Her arms flopped uselessly. Miller checked her carotid. Nothing. Charge again. 300. Clear. Thud. In the kitchen, her father stood. You have to go back now. I don't want to. I know, but they need you. Not just today, tomorrow, and the day after that. He smiled. The same smile from the photograph. Go teach them, Ellie. Teach them what I taught you. Beep. I have a pulse, Miller gasped. Weak and thready, but it's there. He slumped back against the fuselage, sweat dripping despite the cold. Ilara's eyes flickered open for just a moment. She saw Miller's face through the blur. Welcome back, he whispered. You scared the hell out of us. Then came the burning. Not the pleasant heat of hallucination, the searing, agonizing fire of blood returning to dead nerves in her hands. She tried to scream. The endotracheal tube trapped it. Tears leaked from her eyes. I know, Miller said softly. I know it hurts. That means you're alive. Pain is good. He looked at her hands even through the thermal bag. The fingertips were white, hard, dead. Push morphine, 10 milligrams. The drug hit. The pain drifted into manageable distance. Through the open door, lights appeared. Bagram Airfield, a constellation of civilization in the darkness. To Ilara, through tears and morphine, they looked like stars welcoming her home. 72 hours later, Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany smelled like antiseptic and cafeteria food. The fluorescent lights buzzed at a frequency that drilled into Ilara's skull. She opened her eyes. White ceiling tiles. Not snow, not rock. Civilization. She tried to lift her hand. Her arm moved, heavy and sluggish, but her hand didn't respond properly. She looked down. Her hands were wrapped in massive white bandages, elevated on pillows. They looked like cartoon mittens. Boxing gloves made of gauze. Easy, Captain. A nurse in blue scrubs adjusted an IV line. Don't try to move them yet. Where? Ilara's throat felt like sandpaper. Landstuhl, you were medevac from Bagram yesterday. You've been in and out for 3 days. 3 days? The mission felt like 3 years ago. My hands, Ilara said, not a question, a statement. The nurse's expression shifted, professional to pitying. That look told Ilara everything. Dr. Karras will be in shortly to discuss your treatment. You're very lucky to be alive. The PJ said you were clinically dead when they pulled you off that mountain. Lucky. The word felt hollow. Ilara let her head fall back. She closed her eyes and tried to feel her fingers. The sensation was vivid, real. She could feel the trigger, the bolt handle. But it was a lie. Phantom sensation, her nerves replaying signals from tissue that was gone. The door opened, polished dress shoes on linoleum. Major Garrett Caldwell stood at the foot of her bed in service uniform. He looked at her face, then at her bandaged hands. His jaw tightened. Captain Vance, he said quietly. Sir? Silence stretched between them, heavy with unsaid things. I owe you an apology, Caldwell finally said. Several, actually. He pulled a chair closer but remained standing. He reached into his pocket and withdrew something small. A spent brass casing, battered and scarred. He placed it on the bedside table. Master Chief Reeves gave me this. One of your 39. 39. The number hung between them. Sir, I disobeyed direct orders. You saved 12 lives, Caldwell interrupted firmly. My orders would have killed them. OP Alpha was compromised exactly as you predicted. He finally sat. Your father, Marcus. I didn't make the connection until that night. You said you served with him, sir. He was my platoon leader. January 91. Ambush outside Basra. Caldwell's eyes went distant. Marcus grabbed a Sev and pushed through the kill zone. Drew their fire. Got us out. He looked directly at her. He took 3 rounds meant for me. Died covering our extraction. Ilara's throat tightened. She'd known the story, but hearing it from someone who lived because her father died made it devastatingly real. I've spent 23 years trying to live up to his example, Caldwell continued. When I assigned you to OP Alpha, I thought I was protecting you, keeping Marcus Vance's daughter safe because of what I owed him. I didn't need protection, sir. No, you needed trust, and I failed you there. He gestured at her hands. But you succeeded anyway. 39 confirmed kills, 14,000 feet, in a blizzard. Through hypothermia and hypoxia. He stood, coming to attention. The Navy has recommended you for the Silver Star. Reeves wrote an after-action report that's the most compelling document I've ever read. He called you the Angel of the Wakan. Alara looked at her bandaged hands. At what cost? Caldwell's expression softened. The surgeons briefed me. Grade 4 frostbite on your fingertips. They're going to try to save what they can, but... He didn't finish. Your career as a sniper is over. The medical board will recommend retirement, and I'm going to support it. The words landed like physical blows. But Alara had known from the burning in her hands. 2 fingers for 12 lives, she said quietly. I pay it again, sir. Caldwell's eyes glistened. He snapped a salute, slow, respectful, the kind reserved for warriors who had given everything. Your father would be proud. I'm proud, and I'm sorry I ever doubted you. He held the salute until she managed to raise her bandaged hand in an awkward approximation. Then he left, shoes clicking down the hallway. Alara was alone with beeping monitors and antiseptic smell, and the knowledge that everything had changed. She looked at the brass casing. Couldn't pick it up, couldn't hold it. But she could remember firing it. The wind, the cold, the impossible mathematics of saving lives. 2 weeks later, Walter Reed National Military Medical Center in Maryland held a hearing that would determine her future. The room was formal. Mahogany table, American flag. 3 officers in judgment. Alara stood at attention in dress blues, perfect except for one detail. Her right hand wore a black leather glove, custom fitted for the damage underneath. Colonel Strickland presided. Captain Hayes, JAG prosecutor, stood with documents representing the case against her. Captain Vance, Hayes began, pacing, you abandoned your assigned post, climbed to an unauthorized position, engaged targets without clearance, fired 39 rounds, many over friendly forces. He paused for effect. At 3,000 meters, wind variance of 5 miles per hour equals 30 feet of drift. One miscalculation, one gust, and we'd be charging you with manslaughter. Alara stood motionless. Yes, sir. This isn't heroism. This is recklessness bordering on criminality. You violated 3 direct orders, endangered the men you claim to have saved. Sir, OP Alpha was compromised. That you didn't report, Hayes' voice rose. You made a unilateral decision that could have resulted in catastrophic friendly fire. The door opened. Strickland's gavel cracked. This is closed. Who? He stopped. Navy dress blues, 7 men, synchronized steps, ribbons telling stories of valor. Master Chief Declan Reeves led them, leaning on a cane. Behind him, Viper 21, some with arms and slings, all with eyes that had seen death and walked away. Reeves marched to center aisle, 10 feet behind Alara, slammed his cane down. Detail, halt! 6 SEALs stopped as one, heels clicked in thunderous report. Master Chief, Strickland said, face reddening. You're interrupting a legal proceeding. Explain or I'll have MPS remove you. With respect, Colonel, Reeves said, voice deep and carrying. We're material witnesses. We weren't invited. That's an oversight. We have your statements, Master Chief, Hayes said nervously. Paper doesn't bleed, Captain. Reeves stepped forward, eyes hard. This prosecutor wants to talk about what could have happened. I'm here for what did happen. He stood beside Alara, shoulder to shoulder, solidarity. Colonel, I was on the ground, enemy on 3 sides, mortars, machine guns, RPGs. We called for air, denied. QRF, denied. We were done. He pulled back his collar. A livid scar ran from collarbone toward throat. This shrapnel would have killed me if Sierra 10 hadn't taken out that mortar position. Instead, I'm standing here. My wife has a husband. My kids have a father. He turned to Hayes. You want to talk calculations? Captain Vance did math most snipers can't conceptualize. Wind drift at 3,000 meters, Coriolis effect, thermal layers, in a blizzard, with hypothermia, at 14,000 feet, while her body shut down. He gestured to Alara's glove. She gave her hands for my team, traded her career for our lives. And you want to court-martial her? His voice dropped, cold, dangerous. Then court-martial all of us. We're alive because she disobeyed. Every man behind me breathes because she made the hard call when command made the wrong one. Silence except for fluorescent hum. Another voice from the doorway. Colonel Strickland, may I address the board? Major Garrett Caldwell entered in combat fatigues, dusty from Afghanistan. First transport out. Major, Strickland said warily, you're out of uniform. Came straight from theater, sir. Didn't have time. He walked forward. I was Captain Vance's commanding officer. I gave the orders. She disobeyed. The admission hung heavy. My tactical assessment was flawed. OP Alpha was compromised. Enemy spotters exactly where I sent her. If she'd followed orders, she'd be dead. And so would Viper 21. He looked at Hayes. Captain Vance made the correct decision. The hard decision. She saw the battlefield clearer than I did. 12 Americans are alive because of it. He faced Strickland. If anyone faces consequences, sir, it's me. Faulty intelligence, letting personal feelings cloud judgment, trying to protect her instead of trusting her. Strickland sat back, looked at the file, at the seals, at Caldwell's dusty uniform, at Alara with one gloved hand. He closed the file. Captain Vance, Strickland said slowly, regulations about disobeying orders are clear. In peacetime, this ends your career worst possible way. Pause. But we're not at peace, and your action's outcome cannot be ignored. The Navy formally requests you receive the Silver Star. The Army cannot court-martial a Silver Star recipient for actions that earned it. He picked up his stamp. However, your injuries are medically disqualifying. You can't perform your MOS duties. This board recommends medical retirement with full honors. The stamp hit paper with finality. Charges dismissed. Captain Vance, thank you for your service. He stood. And thank you for bringing these men home. Motion erupted. Reeves and Viper 21 snapped to attention. Present arms, Reeves commanded. 7 hands rose in perfect sync. Not saluting an officer, saluting a warrior who paid the price. Alara's throat tightened. She raised her gloved hand slowly, the hand that would never pull a trigger again. Tears tracked her face. She didn't hide them. The last salute of her military career. The only one that truly mattered. 8 months later, autumn in Wyoming painted the high desert gold and rust. Air smelled of sage, pine, coming winter. Alara stood on the firing line at High Desert Long Range Center, hands in fleece jacket pockets. The black glove was gone. She didn't hide the scars anymore. 20 feet away, a young Army specialist lay prone, struggling with 1,400 meters. I don't get it, ma'am, he said, frustrated. My Kestrel says 6 miles per hour left. I'm holding 1.2 mils. Keep missing right. Alara walked over slowly, her gait slightly uneven. Frostbite had taken toes as well as fingers, though she rarely mentioned it. She knelt beside him, looking downrange. Your Kestrel only knows here, she said quietly. Look at 900 meters. See that draw? The specialist adjusted his scope. Yeah, grass moving differently. Crosswind in that depression. Your bullet flies through here, then there, then target. 3 different conditions. Computer can't see that. She reached over, adjusted his turret. Hold 1.8 left. Trust terrain, not just instruments. The specialist settled, breathed, held, fired. 3 seconds later, the distinctive ring of lead on steel. Impact! Center mass! He turned, grinning. How did you know? Alara smiled. Easier now. Someone taught me to read wind, not just measure it. You're the Devil's Tooth sniper, aren't you? He said suddenly. Shot 39 times from 2 miles. Alara stood, brushing dust. I'm the one who learned from people who cared enough to teach. Is it true you lost your fingers up there? She held up her right hand. Index and middle fingers ended at first knuckle. Scars, pink and shiny. Yes. Do you regret it? Alara looked at him long, then looked west, toward Rockies rising against sky. They reminded her of Hindu Kush. Always would. 12 men went home that night, she said simply. 12 families stayed whole. That's not something you regret. A voice called from parking. Alara! A young woman in Army combat uniform jogged over. 19, maybe 20. Eager, nervous. "Ma'am, they told me you teach advanced long range." "That's right." "I'm Private First Class Jordan McKenzie. Just past sniper school."
They said women can't handle extreme long range. We don't have upper body strength or focus. Alara removed her glove completely, held up scarred hand where the young woman could see.
"They said same about me. Then I shot 2 miles in a blizzard and saved 12 lives." Jordan stared at missing fingers. "Ma'am, if you can't shoot anymore, how can you teach?" "Because shooting isn't just about fingers, Private. It's seeing what others miss, reading the invisible, trusting yourself when everyone doubts you." She replaced glove. "That's what I teach." "Will you teach me?" Alara smiled. "That's why I'm here. Get your rifle. We're burning daylight." As Jordan ran to gear, another figure approached. Older man, late 70s, walking slowly with deliberate care. "She reminds me of you," Major Caldwell said. He'd retired 6 months ago, started visiting the range regularly. "She's better than I was at that age," Alara replied. "Your father would be proud."
Not just of what you did, what you're doing now. Alara touched her jacket pocket. Inside was the photo, her at 8, father's shoulders, worn but precious. "I know," she said softly. "I finally know." Jordan returned with her rifle, newer model than a Shytac, but principles same. "Okay, ma'am, where do we start?" Alara led her to the 1,000-yard line. Mountains rose behind them, ancient and patient. "We start with wind," Alara said. "Close your eyes. Don't look at Kestrel. Just feel it." Jordan closed her eyes. "I feel it's moving, left to right, maybe 8 miles per hour?" "Good. Now open. Look down range. Watch grass, dust, heat shimmer. Wind talks in a language most never learn, but if you listen..." "What happens when you listen?" Alara thought of Devil's Tooth. Impossible shots. 39 lives taken to save 12. Cold that stole fingers but couldn't steal what mattered. "When you listen," she said, "you learn impossible is just math we haven't solved yet. That hard choice is usually the right one. That protecting your people matters more than protecting yourself." Jordan nodded slowly. "Will you tell me someday about the mountain?" "Someday," Alara agreed. "When you're ready to understand what it cost." She adjusted Jordan's position, checked fundamentals, saw determination in young eyes. Same determination that drove Alara up 14,000 feet, that kept her firing when body shut down, that traded 2 fingers for 12 futures. "Breathe," Alara instructed. "Wind talks. You just have to listen." Jordan settled, breathed. Rifle barked. Downrange, steel rang. And on a mountain halfway around the world, where snow fell eternal and wind never stopped talking, ghosts of 39 men slept in cold ground. They'd tried killing 12 Americans. Instead, they created a legend. Legend of Angel of Wakan, who climbed to heaven and rained precision death from impossible distance, who gave her hands so others could go home, who